Hi there everyone, and welcome to this quick tutorial for motion matching for Unity. It's going to be a bit different this time. It's actually not so much for the motion matching side of things, it's for importing your animations properly into Unity. A lot of people don't actually know how to do this, and I get a lot of requests saying, why isn't this working? And it's a lot of the time it's because your animations aren't imported properly. Now you would need to import your animations properly for any system, but I'm going to just focus particularly on motion matching. And one of the requests I get a lot is Mixamo. I'm going to be frank with you about Mixamo. I don't like it. Yes, there's a whole bunch of animations. They don't mash up very well together. They're missing a whole bunch of transitions, but since it's asked a lot, here we go. So let's have a look. So we've got this running animation. First thing we need to look out for is do not check in place, okay? Motion matching needs root motion. You don't need to move your character with root motion at runtime, but to pre-process the trajectory, you need root motion. So make sure in place is unchecked. You can do whatever else you want here. Now when we hit download, we want to pick either FBX or FBX for Unity. Now a lot of people think, oh, I wanted to use a Mixamo rig, therefore they go and they use the generic rig in Unity. And you can use generic rigs with motion matching for Unity, but if you can get away with converting it to humanoid, then do it, because it's going to save you problems down the line, because you can use then animations from any rig all combined onto the humanoid. So I'm going to do it first with the FBX for Unity so we can easily convert it to humanoid, and then we will maybe we'll look at the rest of it. So I've got my download. Let me get that and we will drag that into, just going to move it over the other screen. Let me drag this into my project just anywhere. So I've dragged it in, third party. Okay, so that's importing. Now, whenever you get an Mixamo animation, the first thing that you're going to see is your default settings. And it defaults to generic, right? So if we play the animation, yeah, it looks fine. That's fine. But let's go to the rig and let's convert it to humanoid. We create the avatar from this model and click apply. Now, because all the Mixamo rigs are the same, when you create this avatar, so here's the avatar, you can now reuse that avatar and then make sure 100% that it's correct. If we go configure, we can see the avatar here. And because we downloaded FBX for Unity, it's perfectly set up. We don't have to do anything, which is great. If you download the standard FBX, converting to humanoid won't be so easy. So we've converted that animation to humanoid. Very simple. Now we go to our animation. Let's have a look at our animation settings. This is all fine. There's some things going on here. Now, a lot of people don't actually know what this stuff does, but it's really kind of important. If we have a look at the circle here, we can see what's going on. The circle is the root, so the root position, and the arrow is the root rotation. So you can see one thing that's not very good here is it's being calculated by the center, the body orientation. So the root transform rotation over here is being calculated by the body orientation. If I go original, it's whatever that was from the original animation, and usually it's pretty much the same. So we'll keep it to body orientation, but here's the thing. Our character is running forward, and while the overall body orientation might be swaying left and right, we don't really want that in the game. So in the case of this straight running animation where there's no turns, we can just bake that in. Now you can see that that root rotation doesn't change, it just stays forward, which is perfect for a straight running or moving animation. If you have turns, then you need to not check that. There'll be a bit of sway, but usually with turns the sway isn't as much. So now when we play it, it's like that. Now here's the second thing. It's running a bit off center. So that's what this offset is for. So you can offset it left and right. So I'm way overcompensating to the right here, way overcompensating to the left. The actual to get it about straight is, negative 2 point, that looks good to me. Hit apply. And all we got to do is make sure that it just keeps running along the line. You know what? I could do a little bit more, maybe -3. So this is going to happen a lot if you get mocap data, because the mocap data rarely stays on the line. Okay, so let's look at the next thing. Now you can see this root is actually bouncing up and down, and that's because we have our root transform rotate position Y set to original. Now that's fine. However, how that calculates it is it takes the hips and it raycasts down from the first animation. So from the first frame in the animation. So it raycasts down to the ground, and that is the height that it chooses. Now, as the animation plays, it's just going to keep saying that the root is always that same distance down from the center, and therefore you see it's bouncing. We don't want this, okay? If we don't have any upwards movement like a jump or running downhill or uphill during our animation, then we do not want the Y position of the root to change. So we can bake that in. So now it's stuck there. Another good thing you can do is choose the feet, and what it will do then is it'll make sure that it's always at the bottom of the feet. I think in this case we actually want it because that's floating a bit up above, so we can go original. That looks pretty perfect to me, and we can just keep that, and now the feet is going to stay the same. Now we have a really stable root. This is what we want for motion matching. We want a really stable root because it's going to affect the motion matching. Now I rarely ever bake in the root transform X and Y position because, well, that's what happens. Even if you have an idle animation, I don't really bake it much. You can play around with that as you like. But that one you usually keep to itself. Now here's another thing. We have loop. This is a looping animation. We need to check loop. Now if your loop, right, say you've got these things that you can move left and right, and you're trying to find a loop in a whole bunch of data, and it doesn't perfectly line up, it doesn't perfectly loop, you can actually click loop the pose, and it will sort of blend that last bit for that animation so that the pose loops. You only need to do that if it's not already looping. This already loops perfectly, so we'll leave that. All these other settings, you're not going to have to worry about too much. Oh, that's one other thing. If your feet aren't lining up perfectly at the bottom, when you bake it, you can also offset it. That's exactly the same as offsetting the Y rotation. But in this case, it's fine. So we just hit 0. Now this animation is ready. This is a normal import process. I'm sorry guys if making games is not easier than you think. And I know a lot of you know that, but it surprises me how much a lot of people want just everything to be made for them. So that is that. When you're importing animations, just a quick tip, you don't need to import the materials. You don't even need to import the model, but it's nice to have something to look at. You'll just save some data space. All these other settings, they're more advanced. I'm not going to go into them. But look, we have a Mixamo animation, and it is in a humanoid form. Now that we have this avatar, I'm just going to show you how we can quickly reuse that. So let's go back to our Mixamo. We'll download something else. Let's just get another, like a walk. Yeah, we'll get a walk. Walking. There we go. This is the other thing I don't like about the Mixamo library is it's stagnant. It hasn't changed in a very long time. So again, we want to keep in place unchecked, do whatever you want with all this stuff. Hit download, FBX for Unity, download. Okay. Let me get my project. And I'm going to drag that in again. Same thing. Let me just put it there. Okay, so now technically we get this new animation and we've got this rig and it's set to generic. We go humanoid. Now we could create it from this model again. We're going to have duplicate avatars and they're probably going to be created exactly the same way. However, it's just cleaner to have it copy from another avatar because they're the same rig. They're both the Mixamo rig, so we can reuse it. So now I'm just going to drag the avatar in here and we can just reuse the same rig. Apply, and we're good to go. And then we can change all our animation settings before. Let's bake the Y. Let's bake the rotation. Let's bake the Y. Let's give it a bit of an offset this way. about there. Apply. Oh, I did it a bit too much. Apply. Maybe it's about 7. It's a bit fiddly. But it really doesn't take too long. Now here's another thing that you can use. Now with the motion matching, you want to set the max speed of your trajectory generator to perfectly match the speed of your animation. You can get the average velocity from the animation here, and that's pretty helpful a lot of the time to get at least a ballpark, and then you can sort of use trial and error to fine tune that. Now for some reason I was way off. Okay, so that's good enough for now. Okay, so now we got a walking animation and it's in humanoid. So this is my recommended way to import Mixamo animations into Unity. Now, of course, if you want to put this on a character, that character also needs to be humanoid, right? So you're going to have to convert them to humanoid. And I'm going to show you some things that you probably didn't know. You're going to have to go in and configure, and sometimes it doesn't come together right. You might get all these red errors and stuff. You can go to pose and you can say enforce T-pose, and it might not quite do it right. Just note that this whole humanoid thing and this retargeting thing is not as automatic as you like to think. You can actually affect how it does it by rotating bones. You can see there's the error coming now, but I'm going to just undo that because this is a perfect rig. The other thing you actually need to do when you're converting a model, I'm talking about a model now, not an animation. So this is your base model that you're going to play these animations on. You don't need to do any of this to this animation because the Mixamo FBX for Unities will convert perfectly. So your model, if it's generic, you can go to your muscles and muscle settings, and you can play around with the limits. So, I mean, you've got the absolute limits of how the body can rotate. And we can go, say, to the left arm. No, let's go to the legs. Left leg. Alright, so I'm trying to get the knee joint movement here. Which one is it? It's the lower leg stretch. Okay, yeah. I mean, maybe when you import it, this stretches too far. You can now change the limits of what is possible. So now it's like it'll only ever animate to that far. A lot of the time you're not going to need to do that, but keep in mind it's not always going to be automatic. Unity retargeting is not completely perfect in automatic. Now the benefit of all this is now you can use any humanoid animation on your character. If you are using a generic animation, you're stuck with that rig, okay? So just be aware of that. Of course, if you are exporting your character with a Mixamo rig, then you can easily convert it to humanoid because you just download with FBX for Unity. Okay, so that is the FBX for Unity part of this tutorial. Let's look at doing it with a generic rig. Okay, so this time we're going to download this walking animation with the intention of making a generic rig. Again, do not hit in place. Everything else is you can do whatever you want with. This time we're going to select just FBX rather than FBX for Unity, and we can hit download. Download that, and we can then drag it into our game. I'm just going to move this over here. 1 second. So we'll get our walking. And that will import. Okay, so now we've got our walking animation. Now, because it's a generic rig, we just leave this. Again, we can create from model or copy from another. So if you are having multiple, you can just share it. The same thing. You've got the avatar here. You add in more Mixamo animations. You just change it, copy, and just keep copying it. Just keep things nice and clean. Now let's go look at the animation. Now the first thing you're going to notice is there's definitely a problem here. The root just stays at 0, 0 and the character keeps moving. It's because Unity doesn't know with a generic rig how to get the root. So let's go to our rig and let's choose a root node. So this is what we need to do. Choose a root node, and in this case, usually rigs have a root, an actual root node. And if you are making your own animations, please do not make the hips the root. Make a root node that moves nicely. That's just the way you're supposed to do it. Like, that's the professional way to make set up your hierarchy. But in this case, we just have the hips. So let's choose hips, hit apply. Now if we go over to here, we can see the root is now going with it, and it's the same thing now. We now have more settings. Before we added that, these settings weren't available to us. So now the root is going with. Now everything is exactly the same. You probably want to change the name to something better than just mixamo.com. Let's just call it walking. And same thing, we're going to loop the time. We are going to, so now it's saying based upon the root node rotation, because it's a generic rig, it can't do all that other stuff like body orientation. It doesn't know what the chest is or the head is. It's generic, right? So we can now bake that as well. We're going to have to set an offset in a second. We can also bake the Y original so that we don't, jump up and down. And that looks actually pretty damn straight. Yeah, so there we go. That is our generic animation. It's got root motion. The root is super stable. You always want this. Alright, thank you all for watching. This has just been a really quick overview. There's a lot more settings, but these are the main ones that people get wrong all the time. I hope this has helped you understand how better to import your animations, not just for motion matching for Unity, but in general. So thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.